With so many legends having graced the Premier League, it's easy to forget how many greats have passed through over the years. So in this video, I'm looking at 10 players you probably forgot ever played in the Premier League. And I'm talking massive names, Ballon d'Or winners, Champions League and World Cup winners, players and modern day icons who barely get a mention these days. So drop a comment if there's other players that people often forget played in the Premier League, and maybe we'll do another video with your suggestions. You can also help support the channel by subscribing and giving this video a like. So let's wind the clock back to the 90s when the Premier League was still in its infancy. The league was growing, but it wasn't the dominant force it is today. Fans of a certain age will remember how Serie A was the biggest league in Europe, and with the Premier League growing in momentum and more money coming into the game, the league saw bigger players coming from abroad, more often than not towards the end of their career, and particularly from Serie A. Legends like Fabrizio Ravanelli moved to Middlesbrough, and at Chelsea we saw Gianfranco Zola, Gianluca Vialli and Ruud Gullit. But there's one Italian import to Chelsea who often gets forgotten, and that's Pierluigi Casiraghi. Fans of Football Italia will remember him playing at Lazio, but in 1998 he joined up with his compatriots at Stamford Bridge, yet he had a forgettable spell, scoring just one goal in 10 games before suffering a career-ending injury after a collision with Newcastle goalkeeper Shaka Hislop, ensuring he never hit the cult status of Zola, Vialli and others at the club. Another European legend who joined the Premier League at a similar time was Karl-Heinz Riedle, the German international who won the 1990 World Cup as a backup to Jürgen Klinsmann and Rudi Völler. He even scored a penalty in the semi-finals to knock out England from the tournament. Like Casiraghi, Riedle also had a spell at Lazio, before returning to Germany with Borussia Dortmund. He then signed for Liverpool towards the end of his career, but never really established himself in the team due to the sudden emergence of Michael Owen at the club, so he went on to sign for Fulham before retiring. Yet a player who had an even bigger reputation also came to the Premier League towards the end of the 90s. The 98 World Cup was very much a French affair, but the Golden Boot winner from that tournament was Croatian Davor Šuker. The striker started the 90s at Dinamo Zagreb, before moving to Spain with Sevilla, translating his reputation as a clinical finisher to La Liga. He also played with Maradona at Sevilla, again, another spell that's often forgotten. He then moved to Real Madrid, winning La Liga in his first season, followed by the Champions League in the next campaign. But despite his strong performance at the 98 World Cup, he started slipping down the pecking order at Real. So he moved to Arsenal and had a decent time there, scoring 8 goals in 22 Premier League appearances, before joining West Ham for a season. Then at the turn of the millennium, a former Ballon d'Or winner joined the Premier League in George Weah, who'd established himself as one of the best strikers in the world at AC Milan, and possibly one of the greatest African players of all time. But towards the end of his career in Serie A, he joined Chelsea on loan, where Gianluca Vialli was now manager. And his short time at Chelsea was a success, particularly in the FA Cup, where he scored crucial goals en route to Chelsea winning the final. The following season, he made a permanent move to Man City, who are now back in the Premier League, but he never really established himself in the team. But it's not often that the Premier League has a Ballon d'Or winner in its ranks, so it's incredible that his time in England barely gets a mention today. Another player who came from Serie A, and probably one of the most iconic and easily recognisable players of his generation, was Edgar Davids, who stood out on the pitch due to his dreadlocked hair and his protective goggles he wore due to glaucoma. The Dutch star had played for some of the biggest clubs in the world. Starting out at Ajax, he had spells at AC Milan, Barcelona, Juventus and Inter Milan. Yet in the mid-noughties, he had an often forgotten spell at Spurs, despite performing well and helping them secure 2 top 5 Premier League finishes. Davids popped back to England a few seasons later for a blink-and-you'll-miss-it spell at Crystal Palace, before becoming player manager at League Two side Barnet, with a chaotic mix of man-of-the-match performances, controversies and red cards aplenty. As the balance of power in European football began to shift from Serie A to La Liga, the Premier League started to attract more Spanish talent. And one forgotten Spanish giant who briefly graced the league was Fernando Morientes. A prolific striker at Real Madrid, Morientes started to see less game time as the Galacticos era gathered pace, particularly after the arrival of Brazilian Ronaldo. Following a loan spell at Monaco, where he famously helped knock Madrid out of the Champions League, he signed for Liverpool in 2005. And despite high hopes, he never found consistent form and only lasted a season and a half at Anfield. So from Morientes, who joined the Premier League towards the end of his prime, we go to a player who did the exact reverse. Gerard Piqué signed for Manchester United at the age of just 17 after coming through Barcelona's academy. Despite spending 4 years at Old Trafford, he only made 12 league appearances before rejoining his boyhood club, where he went on to become one of the best defenders of his generation during one of Barcelona's all-time great eras. And another player who excelled at Barcelona was Samuel Eto'o, who actually started his career at Real Madrid before establishing himself at Real Mallorca, before trophy-laden spells at Barcelona and Inter Milan, where he became one of the most feared strikers in world football. And after a surprise move to Russia, Eto'o finally arrived in the Premier League with Chelsea, where he had a decent return in front of goal during a one-season stay. He then made a brief move to Everton before returning back to Italy. And we returned to Chelsea again for a player who won the World Cup both as player and manager. But can you even remember him playing in the Premier League? Most remember Didier Deschamps for his time at Juventus in the 90s, but at the end of that decade he spent a single season at Chelsea, winning the FA Cup during his brief stint in England. Surely Deschamps is one of the most successful figures in football history, yet his time in the Premier League barely gets a mention. So finally we end on another 90s icon in Patrick Kluivert, who burst on the scene with Ajax after scoring the winning goal in the 1995 Champions League final. After a brief spell in Serie A with AC Milan, he settled at Barcelona, where he enjoyed the peak of his career. After his time in Spain ended, he signed for Newcastle on a free transfer, linking up with Geordie legend Alan Shearer. He only spent one season at the club, but had a respectable goal return, but is yet another legend we often forget played in the Premier League. So why not watch this video where we look at 7 father and sons to have played in the Premier League, including Patrick and Justin Kluivert.